This could be you. Money, nice watches, fast cars, girl, victory poker. All you gotta do is submit a 1-minute video and you can be like this.
Before Dan Bilzerian would clock in over 30 million followers on Instagram and would be seen kicking it with everyone from Marshmello, Vitaly, Steve Aoki, Post Malone, Floyd Mayweather, and more.
But you hated the military that bad that you would destroy your legs to get out.
I was so pissed. I mean, I had done everything that I was supposed to do. I made it through Hell Week with broken legs. Like, I felt like I just got so, like, railroaded.
Before Dan Bilzerian would launch his weed brand Ignite and the corresponding YouTube channel, giving a behind-the-scenes look into the life of America's biggest playboy.
I have a bunch of women hanging around.
Before T-Pain would release a song titled Dan Bilzerian, and the man would find himself at the heart of one of the most frightening incidents on American soil in recent history. The self-proclaimed king of Instagram, well, he's been in our lives for almost a decade now, having posted this first pic to the gram back in 2012. As the story goes, Dan, he first made a name for himself on the poker scene, and from there he made moves to break into Hollywood, where he made some investments and also booked some small roles in a number of features.
What's going on? Nothing, bro. I'm about to get out of here with my girl.
After some Hollywood hiccups, well, he found a new niche via social media where he could blaze his own trail and have all the perks of fame and fortune without really having to ever go to an audition or wait around on a movie set. Now, my first video on Dan was from 2015, and it was my first video to clock in 500,000 views. So to be completely honest with you guys, well, I gotta give Dan Bilzerian a huge thank you for helping me launch this channel. With new information coming out all the time and old clips surfacing on YouTube, well, we decided it was time to give you guys a much more detailed update on the rise to fame of Dan Blitz Bilzerian. What's going on, guys? It's your boy Michael McCrutton back at it again with another Before They Were Famous video. Now, recent drops on this channel include updates on Nelk, Vitaly, Bradley Martin before he sold drugs, and more. As always, you guys gotta let us know who's next in the comments down below. I've been hearing a lot of buzz about the Kid Larray, also Lil Loaded, so we'll get working on those. But, oh yeah, you can also text me. We now got a number. It's right below. All right, see you guys after the intro. Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell. Boom! Daniel Brandon Bilzerian was born on December 7, 1980 in Tampa, Florida. Now, Daniel is of Armenian and American descent, and he is the son of corporate takeover specialist Paul Bilzerian and his wife Terry Steflin. Now, he also has a brother who is a fellow poker player by the name of Adam Bilzerian.
My little brother busted out today, which kind of sucked.
Who's your little brother?
Adam Bilzerian. So, yeah, we got a lot of...
Badass Junior.
Yeah, he's a little bit more mellow.
Now, his father, he was a corporate raider on Wall Street. I got no idea what that means, so I think it looks something like this.
Crimson Permanent Assurance!
Yeah, I'm sure it looked exactly like that. Now, basically what his dad did is he would go around and buy huge sums of shares in any given company, and then he would take it over from the inside. And with all that hard work his dad put into stripping businesses for spare parts, well, he was able to set up both his boys with trust funds to secure their futures. Which kind of makes Dan's come-up story a lot less like Hugh Hefner's and a lot more like Bruce Wayne's. Come to think of it, Dan kind of is like the real-world Batman. Now, his family lived in an 11-bedroom mansion that was half the size of Buckingham Palace, with its own indoor basketball court, batting cage, lakefront views, swimming pools, water slides, and an imported volcanic rock mountain. For real. But despite all this, well, Dan, he had a lonely and often stressful childhood. Now, his father, he was absent most of the time, and when he was around, well, he tended to make life difficult. Now, there was an incident that involved Dan's Little League baseball team where his dad was charged for slander in an argument over a $5,000 donation. Now, the case, it was later dismissed. Basically, I didn't get a ton of attention as a kid, Dan has claimed. He also stated, I guess that's why I'm such a flashy lunatic. Now, when his dad finally spent some time with his son, well, it was on a drive to school at the age of 10. And as the car pulled up to the gates of the school, well, his dad broke the news that he was going away to prison.
It was pretty rough. I'll never forget the day because it was, front page news for all the newspapers, but I didn't know. So the litigation was going on for about a year, and he chose to wait till the actual day that he went to tell me. He actually drove me into school, which is weird because he never drove me in. And he told me on the ride to school, which is pretty shitty because everybody at school knew it was like front page news. And the reason he didn't tell me because that was like the last day of his appeal, so.
From there on out, Bruce Wayne, Dan Bilzerian, well, he was all on his own. Kinda.
How you lost your virginity when you were in 8th grade.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, not one of my finest moments, but it was a hooker in Mexico.
With his dad behind bars, Dan, he faced ridicule from his classmates, and he began to show his own contempt for authority, getting expelled from 2 schools in 1 year. Now, he then ended up in a military school under the care of a drill instructor. And after that, the family, they moved more than 2,000 miles northwest to Utah, where his dad, he was out on parole and had bought a new company.
And so, if you have a problem, okay, if some tragedy befalls you, it's in the past, now we look forward.
That's when he entered the Navy SEALs training program in the year 2000, but despite multiple attempts, he was never able to successfully graduate. Now that's an entirely different story on its own, and we got a lot to get through. Now don't feel too bad for the guy though. He eventually went on to enroll at the University of Florida and major in business and criminology. Now while at school, it was his extracurricular activities that would become more lucrative than anything he could ever earn from his studies. The early 2000s, we saw the boom of the poker phase, and Dan, he got some early tips from his brother on how to play the game.
Are you on a no-fly list, like a terrorist?
Not that I know of. I don't think they publish those, but yeah, I've been flying okay so far.
You got thoroughly searched at the airport.
I think the beard's not going to help, but yeah, usually I'm pretty good.
In 2009, Bilzerian was playing in the World Series of Poker main event, and he finished in the 180th place, which I assume is good. Though it definitely doesn't sound great, you know what I mean? It must be like tennis. Everybody in the world, they get ranked. So with that in mind, 180, it ain't bad.
Well, in the beginning, because they all thought that I was, a rich trust fund idiot, and I played pretty loose. I was one of the first people that played like real loose aggressive, so it was fun to play with.
Now, his poker career has had lots of ups and downs. He went broke in his sophomore year, and he played some seedy games in international waters. Now, eventually, he got some money in his pocket, and he never looked back. Now, for the next couple of years, Danny was a big name on the poker scene right at the climax of its popularity. Now, there was even some situation where he got banned from ESPN.
I told a joke from Gran Torino. Clint Eastwood in Gran Torino said, a Mexican, a Jew, and a colored guy walk into a bar. The bartender looks up and says, get out. I posted that on my Twitter, thought it was funny. She lost her mind, calls me swearing, leaving angry messages, cussed out the CEO from Victory Poker. She sent me nasty text messages. She called me a tool bag on Twitter and has pretty much lost her mind.
Now, through poker, Dan has made enough money, he never needed to touch his trust fund. In fact, he states he gave it to his brother. Now, in November of 2013, Dan's myth as a poker player grew to mythic heights when he posted to his Twitter feed that he had just won $10.8 million in a single night. Now, to be honest, this victory can never be properly verified, so whether it's actually true or not is anyone's guess. And Dan, he's never been one to let a thing like the truth get in the way of a good story. Now, he continued to make bold claims about his poker earnings. This included that he won over $50 million throughout all of the games he's played in 2014, and that he had never lost more than $3.6 million in a single session. Now, with money in the bank, Dan, he began to diversify his interests. On March 9th, 2011, Dan, he raced and beat Tom Goldstein at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway with a wager of $385,000 on the line. Now, Dan, he was driving an 86 427 Shelby Cobra, and Goldstein, he got behind the wheel of a Ferrari 458 Italia. Danny then set his sights on show business. He also finances films, which earned him his first role in the Mark Wahlberg Afghan war film Lone Survivor. But Dan ended up suing the production, stating that he had loaned them $1 million in exchange for a minimum of 8 minutes of screen time and 80 words of dialogue. Now, when the finished film was released, his role, it had been diminished to 1 minute of screen time, and he only had one line. Now, Danny wasn't happy. He sued for $1.2 million, the original loan, plus a 20% penalty. But the lawsuit, it was later dropped when Dan reportedly made $1.5 million back on the investment because the film was a commercial success. Alright, now we gotta talk about the girls. No drug abuse and overindulgence. It led to Dan reportedly suffering 2 heart attacks back to back at the age of 25. And this was after he doubled down on some Viagra. So yeah, there's tons of videos of him. He's gotten on like 9 times in a day. He's done it all.
You slept with 9 women in one day in Cabo.
No, it's definitely true.
How?
No, it wasn't 9 women. No, it was. I had sex 9 times.
Okay.
It was, I think, 4 or 5 women.
Early in his career, he was also dating Playboy Playmate, who I believe is Lindsay Pellis, and she at the time had 100,000 followers on Instagram. Now that was massive for 2012, so Dan, he decided to jump on the app for himself, and he would show off what he thought was cool. Now by 2014, his following, it had surpassed 1 million, and he started making news headlines, but not typically for the right reasons.
And what about the porn star off the roof?
So that was a shoot for Hustler.
Now, I don't want to talk about that because I don't want to get in trouble. I'm hoping one day I'll be invited to a Dan Bilzerian mansion party. So I think I'm just going to wrap this video up here. My name's Michael McCrudden. Of course, we make all sorts of celebrity bios. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Let us know who's next in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in another video. Boom!